Picture this. A dusty storage facility somewhere in California. The lock gets cut. The metal door rolls up with a groan. And standing there, arms crossed, completely unbothered by the chaos erupting around her, is a woman who somehow manages to look both completely in control and totally unpredictable at the same time. That's Brandi Passante. And if you watched Storage Wars during its golden years, you already know exactly who she is and why she mattered so much to that show. But here's the thing about Brandi that most people forget once the cameras stop rolling. Her real story, the one that happened off-screen, away from the auction blocks and the bidding wars and the constant noise of reality television, that story is so much more interesting than anything the producers could have scripted. And trust me, they definitely tried to script some things. Because Brandi Passante wasn't just a cast member on a popular cable show. She was the heartbeat of Storage Wars in a way that nobody else on that roster could claim. She was real in a world that was built on performance. She was sharp in a world that rewarded chaos. And she was resilient in ways that most people, even her biggest fans, never fully understood until the cameras were long gone and life had already thrown everything it had at her. So today, we're going to talk about all of it. Where she came from. How she became the face of one of the most watched reality shows of the last 15 years. What happened when her personal life fell apart in very public ways. How she dealt with health challenges that would have knocked most people down for good. And where she is right now, because the answer to that last question is honestly more inspiring than you might expect. This is the full story of Brandi Passante, and by the time we're done here, you're going to have a whole new level of respect for a woman who never asked for your sympathy but absolutely earned your admiration. Let's start at the beginning. Because Brandi's path to reality television fame was not the kind of Hollywood origin story you'd expect. There was no audition tape. No agent pitching her to producers. No calculated move to break into the entertainment industry. Brandi Passante stumbled into television almost by accident, and that accidental quality is exactly what made her so watchable from the very first episode. Before Storage Wars was even a concept, Brandi was living a pretty regular life. She was working, trying to make ends meet, and figuring out her path the way most people in their 20s do, which is to say imperfectly and with a lot of trial and error. She wasn't somebody who had mapped out a 5-year plan that ended with her face on a cable television network. She was just a person trying to build something real. What she did have was a sharp instinct for value. Not just financial value, although that definitely came into play later, but the kind of deeper value that not everyone can see at first glance. The value of a well-made piece of furniture buried under a pile of junk. The value of a vintage item sitting in a box that nobody else thought twice about. Brandi had always had an eye for things that other people overlooked, and that skill, which sounds small when you describe it, turned out to be the foundation of everything that came next. She came into the world of storage auctions through her relationship with Jarrod Schulz, who was already dabbling in that space when the two of them connected. Now, storage auctions, for those who don't know, are exactly what they sound like. When people stop paying for their storage units, the contents get auctioned off to the highest bidder. You get to peek inside from the doorway, but you can't touch anything or do a thorough inspection before you buy. It's a gamble every single time, and the people who are good at it develop a kind of sixth sense for reading a unit quickly and deciding whether it's worth the risk. Brandi got good at it fast. She and Jarrod started building a small operation together, learning the business from the ground up, making mistakes and learning from them, developing their instincts by spending real money and sometimes losing it. By the time the producers of what would become Storage Wars came calling, Brandi and Jarrod were already legitimate players in the Southern California storage auction scene. They weren't famous yet, but they knew what they were doing. When Annie approached them about being part of a new reality show built around storage auctions, the decision wasn't obviously easy. Reality television in 2010 was already a crowded and somewhat notorious space. People had strong opinions about what it did to the people who appeared on it. But the opportunity was real, and Brandi and Jarrod decided to take the chance. What none of them could have predicted was just how big that chance was going to get. Storage Wars premiered in December of 2010, and from almost the very first episode, Brandi Passante was different from everyone else on that show. Not louder. Not more dramatic. Not more outrageous. Different in a quieter and ultimately more lasting way. The show had plenty of big personalities from day one. There were guys who yelled their bids and trash-talked the competition and played to the camera in ways that were entertaining but also clearly performative. And then there was Brandi, who seemed almost allergic to performance for its own sake. When she was annoyed, she said so. When something was funny, she laughed. When Jarrod did something that frustrated her, which happened often and loudly, she did not pretend otherwise for the sake of keeping the peace. That authenticity was magnetic. In a genre built on manufactured drama and carefully edited storylines, Brandi came across as genuinely, almost stubbornly real. She wasn't playing a character. She was just herself, and herself turned out to be exactly what audiences were craving. Her dynamic with Jarrod Schulz became one of the central narratives of the early seasons, and it was compelling in ways that went beyond simple relationship drama. These were two people who clearly cared about each other but also drove each other absolutely crazy, and they were doing it while simultaneously trying to run a legitimate business in a competitive environment. Brandi brought the pragmatism. Jarrod brought the impulse. Together they were volatile and unpredictable and genuinely entertaining, not because they were performing but because that was actually how they operated. Brandi also distinguished herself with her business instincts. She wasn't just window dressing on someone else's auction strategy. She had real opinions, real knowledge, and a real eye for value. When she spotted something promising in a unit, she was usually right. When she pushed back on Jarrod's more reckless bids, her concerns were usually valid. She was a full partner in the operation, even if the show sometimes framed their relationship more as a romantic drama than a business partnership. Over the seasons, her fan base grew steadily and organically. People weren't watching Storage Wars just to see what was in the next storage unit. They were watching to see what Brandi was going to say, how she was going to react, whether she and Jarrod were going to have the argument that the last 10 minutes had clearly been building toward. She became the emotional anchor of a show that could have easily been nothing more than a series of mildly interesting auction scenes. Awards, formal recognition, that kind of institutional validation never really came Brandi's way, and that's honestly a reflection of how the entertainment industry tends to undervalue reality television even when it's producing genuinely skilled performers. But the numbers didn't lie. Storage Wars became one of the most watched shows on A&E during her tenure, pulling in millions of viewers per episode at its peak. And a significant portion of those viewers showed up specifically because Brandi Passante was on the screen. One thing that often gets lost in the storytelling around reality television stars is the actual work. The real, grinding, day-to-day work that happens in between camera days and confessional interviews. For Brandi, that work was significant and it was real, and it deserves more attention than it usually gets. She and Jarrod co-owned a thrift and resale store called Now and Then, located in Orange County, California. If you watched the show, you saw versions of their shop life filtered through the usual reality television lens, which means the cameras were there for the dramatic moments and the big reveals but not necessarily for the unglamorous hours of sorting, pricing, cleaning, and managing inventory that made up the actual substance of running that kind of business. Brandi was deeply involved in all of it. She understood the retail side of the storage auction world in ways that went beyond just buying units and flipping items. She thought about merchandising. She thought about customer experience. She thought about how to present items in ways that would maximize their perceived value to shoppers. These are not small or simple skills, and she developed them through genuine hands-on experience rather than business school theory. The store had its runs of success and its difficult periods, as small retail businesses always do. The storage auction world itself is more competitive than it looks from the outside, and the margins are often thinner than the television version suggests. Brandi navigated all of that with a pragmatism that her on-screen persona sometimes obscured but that her actual business decisions consistently reflected. She also started developing her personal brand in ways that extended beyond the show itself. Her social media presence, particularly on Instagram, grew into a genuine community. She wasn't just posting promotional content or trying to maintain a celebrity image. She was sharing real glimpses of her life, her opinions, and her personality, and people responded to that realness the same way they had responded to it on Storage Wars. Authenticity, it turns out, is consistently more valuable than curation when it comes to building a lasting relationship with an audience. By the time the Storage Wars landscape started shifting, Brandi had built enough of a foundation, both professionally and in terms of public profile, that she wasn't going to disappear when the show did. She had become something more durable than a reality television character. She had become a recognizable and genuinely respected figure in a specific corner of the entertainment and resale worlds. Here's where the story gets harder to tell and harder to hear, but it's also where Brandi's real strength becomes most visible. Because the years between roughly 2018 and 2021 were genuinely brutal for her, and she handled them with a grace that most people in her position would not have managed. The end of her relationship with Jarrod Schulz was not a clean break. These things rarely are, especially when you have been with someone for years, built a business together, appeared on national television together, and had your lives genuinely intertwined in ways that go far beyond a simple romantic partnership. Brandi and Jarrod had been together for a long time before the cameras found them, and their relationship was complicated and real in ways that the show could never fully capture. When they split in 2018, they initially kept the separation private. This meant that for a period of time, fans who were still watching Storage Wars were seeing what appeared to be a functioning couple while in reality the relationship had already ended. That's an uncomfortable situation under any circumstances, but particularly so in the context of a show that had built so much of its identity around their dynamic. When the truth came out publicly in 2020, the reaction was significant. People felt surprised, confused, and for some fans, almost betrayed, which is a complicated reaction to have to someone else's private relationship but also a very human one when you've spent years watching people you feel like you know. Brandi handled the public revelation with characteristic directness. She didn't dramatize it more than it already was. She acknowledged it, addressed it, and moved forward. Then, in 2021, things got considerably darker. Jarrod was charged with misdemeanor domestic violence following an altercation with Brandi at a bar in Orange County. This was not a quiet, behind-the-scenes development. It was public. It was reported widely. And it put Brandi in the position of having one of the worst moments of her personal life become a topic of public discussion and debate. The way she navigated that period says a great deal about who she is. She did not disappear. She did not post elaborate statements or try to control the narrative in ways that would have been understandable but also slightly cynical. She continued to live her life with the same directness that had always defined her, and she let her actions over time speak louder than any single statement could have. It would have been completely understandable if Brandi had retreated from public life entirely during this period. Many people would have. The combination of a painful and public breakup, a frightening and public legal situation, and the general chaos of that moment in time would have justified stepping back. The fact that she didn't, that she kept going and kept showing up, is not a small thing. As if the personal turmoil of those years wasn't enough, Brandi also faced significant health challenges during this period, and her willingness to talk openly about them became one of the more meaningful aspects of her public presence. When COVID-19 swept through the world starting in early 2020, Brandi was among those who contracted it. She talked about her experience with the virus, including the symptoms and the recovery process and the lingering effects that many people experienced long after the initial illness had passed. In a media environment where celebrity health disclosures can sometimes feel performative or strategically timed, Brandi's openness about her COVID experience came across as genuinely motivated by a desire to share something real with the people who followed her. But the bigger health disclosure came when she revealed that she had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. For those unfamiliar with it, Hashimoto's is a chronic autoimmune condition in which the immune system attacks the thyroid gland. It can cause a wide range of symptoms including fatigue, weight changes, mood fluctuations, and a host of other effects that can significantly impact quality of life. It is a manageable condition but not a curable one, meaning it requires ongoing attention and lifestyle adjustments indefinitely. Living with a chronic illness while also navigating the other challenges she was facing during this period was genuinely difficult, and Brandi did not minimize that difficulty. She talked about it honestly, including the frustrating aspects of managing symptoms and the emotional weight of dealing with a health condition that is invisible to most of the people around you. Her transparency about Hashimoto specifically resonated with a significant number of followers who were dealing with similar diagnoses and feeling isolated and misunderstood. This is one of the places where Brandi's public platform became something more meaningful than entertainment. When someone with a significant following talks openly about a chronic health condition without making it sound like either a crisis or a minor inconvenience that they've easily overcome, they create space for other people to feel seen and less alone. Brandi did that, and the response from her community made clear that it mattered. Managing her health while rebuilding other aspects of her life became a parallel narrative that played out largely on social media, and it added dimension to the public version of Brandi that went well beyond anything Storage Wars had been able to show. She was no longer just the sharp-tongued auction bidder with a complicated love life. She was a real person dealing with real things, and that humanity made her more compelling and more beloved than any scripted storyline could have. Let's talk about the return, because it's genuinely one of the better comeback stories in recent reality television history. When Storage Wars came back for its 15th season, which aired starting in June of 2023, Brandi was part of the returning cast. But the version of Brandi that showed up for season 15 was meaningfully different from the one audiences had last seen in the earlier run of the show. She came back solo. No Jarrod. No complicated couple dynamic. No business partnership running alongside a romantic relationship. Just Brandi Passante, standing on her own at auction blocks, making her own bids, trusting her own instincts, and doing it with a calm and settled energy that felt completely earned. Watching her in season 15 was fascinating precisely because of the contrast with what came before. The earlier Brandi had been great television partly because of how reactive she was, constantly responding to Jarrod's choices, to the other bidders, to the chaos of the auction environment. The season 15 Brandi was no less present and no less sharp, but there was a stillness to her that hadn't been there before. She seemed like someone who had gone through serious things and come out the other side knowing exactly who she was and what she was capable of. Fans noticed immediately. The reception to her return was warm in ways that went beyond simple nostalgia. People weren't just happy to see a familiar face. They were happy to see this particular woman doing well, thriving even, after everything they knew she had been through. That's a different and deeper kind of fan response, and it reflects the genuine relationship Brandi had built with her audience over the years. Her performance in season 15 also reminded people that whatever else might be said about her television career, the woman genuinely knows the storage auction business. Her bids were considered and strategic. Her instincts for spotting value were clearly still sharp. She wasn't there to trade on nostalgia or coast on her established reputation. She was there to compete, and she competed well. The return also opened up new conversations about what comes next. With the show announced for a 16th season, speculation about Brandi's continued involvement has been steady and enthusiastic. Fans have made clear, through social media and every other channel available to them, that they want more of this version of Brandi. Not the one defined by her relationship or her role within a partnership, but the fully realized, self-determined, deeply capable version that season 15 put on display. Outside of her television career, Brandi has built a life that looks genuinely happy in ways that feel hard-won rather than simply fortunate. Her social media presence continues to be one of the more authentic corners of celebrity-adjacent internet content, which is admittedly not a very high bar but which she clears by a significant margin. She shares real glimpses of her daily life without making it feel like a carefully curated highlight reel. She engages with her followers in ways that reflect actual relationship rather than transactional content strategy. She talks about things that matter to her, including her health, her interests, her evolving sense of who she is and what she wants. The community that has formed around her online presence is loyal and engaged in ways that reflect the quality of that relationship. In her personal life, Brandi has found a new chapter with a partner named Clifford Beaver. She keeps the details of this relationship relatively private, which is consistent with the way she's always operated, sharing enough to let people know she's doing well without turning her personal life into content. What comes through clearly, even in the small glimpses she shares, is that she seems genuinely settled and content in a way that life during the storage wars years, with all its chaos and complication, clearly didn't allow for. Her interests outside the storage and resale world have also continued to develop. She has spoken about the importance of taking care of herself both physically and mentally, and the journey of managing Hashimoto's disease has clearly deepened her relationship with her own health and well-being in ways that extend beyond just managing symptoms. She brings that awareness to how she talks about health and self-care with her audience, and it adds another layer of substance to what could otherwise be a fairly standard social media presence. There have also been whispers of potential crossover moments with other shows in the reality television space. Nothing confirmed, nothing officially announced, but the kind of speculation that tends to build when a performer has enough credibility and fan support that other productions can see the value in bringing them on board. Whether or not those particular rumors materialize, the fact that they're circulating at all speaks to the durability of Brandi's appeal and reputation. Here's what I think is the most important thing about Brandi Passante's story, and it's something that gets undervalued in most discussions of reality television and the people who appear on it. She represents what it actually looks like to survive something. Not in a dramatic, theatrical, made-for-television way, but in the quiet, grinding, day-after-day way that real survival actually works. She went through the end of a long relationship. She went through a frightening public situation. She dealt with a chronic illness diagnosis while also dealing with everything else. She navigated all of this in partial public view, which adds its own particular kind of difficulty to everything. And she came out the other side not transformed into a different person or emerged with some newly polished personal brand, but simply more herself. More settled in who she is. More confident in her own instincts and her own judgment. More at peace with the life she's actually living rather than the one that might look better from the outside. That's not a small thing. That's actually a very large and very rare thing. Most people who go through significant difficulties either retreat entirely or overcorrect into a kind of performative resilience that looks great on the surface but doesn't feel real. Brandi did neither. She just kept going, kept being honest, kept showing up, and let the accumulation of those ordinary acts of persistence tell the story. She also represents something specific about women in spaces that are traditionally coded as masculine. Storage auctions, at the time storage wars began, were very much a male-dominated world. The culture around them reflected that, with its emphasis on aggressive bidding, competitive trash talk, and physical confidence. Brandi walked into that world and carved out space for herself not by mimicking the dominant mode but by being fundamentally different from it. She was sharp rather than loud. Strategic rather than impulsive. Confident without needing to perform dominance. And she won, repeatedly, in ways that the people around her often didn't see coming. That template, of succeeding in a competitive space by being genuinely yourself rather than a version of what that space expects from you, is one that extends well beyond storage auctions or reality television. It's a lesson that lands differently when you watch someone actually living it rather than just hearing about it in the abstract. Let's talk about legacy for a moment, because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot in entertainment contexts and usually means relatively little. But in Brandi's case, it actually means something specific and worth thinking about. Storage Wars has now run for 15 seasons with a 16th on the way. In that time, the show has cycled through a significant number of cast members, some of whom made big impressions during their time and then faded from memory, and others who became genuinely embedded in the culture of the show. Brandi is in the second category, and she's at the upper end of it. Ask anyone who watched Storage Wars in any of its eras which cast member they remember most vividly, which one felt most real, which one they'd most want to see return, and a significant percentage of those people are going to say Brandi Passante. That kind of lasting resonance in a genre that churns through personalities at a rapid pace is genuinely impressive, and it wasn't achieved through scandal or controversy or any kind of deliberate brand strategy. It was achieved through the accumulation of real moments over many years of being authentically herself in front of an audience. The fan base she has built is also worth noting. It extends well beyond the typical reality television fan demographic. People who discovered Storage Wars during its peak years have followed Brandi's life and career through social media in ways that reflect a genuine ongoing investment in who she is and how she's doing. That's not standard fan behavior for a reality television personality. That's the kind of sustained engagement that reflects a real and meaningful connection. Her story has also contributed, in ways both large and small, to ongoing conversations about what we ask of people who appear on reality television and what responsibility audiences and networks have toward them. The fact that she dealt with difficult personal situations in partial public view, and that her audience watched and responded with genuine concern and support rather than simply treating it as entertaining content, says something meaningful about the kind of relationship she built with the people who followed her. So where does that leave us? Where does Brandi Passante stand right now, at this particular moment, with a new season of Storage Wars on the horizon and a life that looks, by all available evidence, genuinely good? She stands in a place that she built herself, largely by refusing to be anything other than who she actually is. By staying honest when it would have been easier to manage perceptions. By staying present when it would have been understandable to disappear. By staying open about the hard things, the health stuff, the personal stuff, the navigating life in public stuff, in ways that turned her audience from passive viewers into something more like a real community. She's not the biggest celebrity to come out of reality television. She's not the one with the largest platform or the most mainstream name recognition. But she might be one of the most genuinely respected, and in the long run, that matters more. The 16th season of Storage Wars is coming. And if Brandi Passante is part of it, which her fans are clearly hoping she will be, she's going to show up exactly the same way she always has. Herself. Completely, stubbornly, beautifully herself. And honestly? After everything she's been through, that might be the most impressive thing about her. Let us know in the comments what your favorite Brandi moment from the show was, whether you're excited about the new season, and who else you're hoping to see back on the auction floor. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll see you there.